Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the podcast. And today I am going to go over my review of AEW's All Out. Starting off the evening, we start with Daniel Garcia versus MJF. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Garcia and MJF, with MJF keeping the pace of the match. Garcia and MJF both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Garcia hitting multiple neck breakers on MJF. Garcia then hits a DDT off the top rope on MJF. MJF gets up, hits a Panama Sunrise off the top rope on Garcia for a near fall. MJF then applies a Walls of Jericho, but the hold is broken. Garcia then applies a Dragon Slayer, but the hold is broken. MJF then gets up, applies the Salt of the Earth. Hold is broken. Garcia then applies a Guillotine Choke on MJF. Garcia then hits a Pile Driver on MJF for a near fall. MJF then gets up, hits a low blow on Garcia. And then MJF hits a Jackknife into a pin. Pins for the 3, and your winner of the match is MJF. After the match, MJF goes to shake Garcia's hand. Garcia then shakes shakes his hand and hits him with a low blow, and then Garcia hits him with a pile driver off the top rope. A couple things I want to talk about, man, with this matchup. Number one, this was a great match. I know a lot of people were kind of, skeptical about this match. I thought it told a hell of a story. Obviously, there was a little revenge here for Garcia after what MJF did to him a couple weeks ago by taking him pretty much out of AEW for a couple weeks. This was a great match. It was a great way to start All Out. Obviously, there was other things that were going on as well. After this matchup, I know MJF, after he had won this matchup, it seems like he is actually going to take an extended time off. I don't know how long that is going to be, which honestly I was kind of shocked by that he was even taking some time off, because he literally just came back from injury. So obviously he's going to take some time off after this matchup that he had with Garcia. So who knows what's in store for Garcia, or especially MJF, and who knows when MJF is actually going to come back to AEW. Moving on from that, we have an AEW Tag Team Championship matchup. It is the Young Bucks defending the AEW Tag Team belts against Yuta and Claudio. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between the Bucks and Claudio and Yuta. Yuta and Claudio were keeping the pace of the match. Nick Jackson hits a Hurricane Rana off the apron. Young Bucks then hit an EVP trigger for a near fall. Claudio then hits a giant swing, but Matt Jackson hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the Young Bucks. Hats off to the Young Bucks for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we're going to our next match of the night. In my honest opinion, probably one of the matches of the night. It is Will Ospreay defending the international title against Pac. Like I said, man, I thought this was a great match, back-and-forth matchup between Ospreay and Pac, with Pac hitting a Sky Twister to the outside, taking out Ospreay. Ospreay then gets to the top rope, hits a Sky Twister of his own on Pac. Ospreay and Pac then both exchange in the middle of the ring. Pac hits an Avalanche Brainbuster for a near fall. Ospreay then hits a forearm off the barricade, taking out Pac. Ospreay then hits a handspring corkscrew kick on Pac, as well as an Oz Cutter. Pac then gets up, hits a release German suplex off the apron on Ospreay that looked absolutely brutal. Pac then hits a Poison Rana. Ospreay hits a Poison Rana of his own on Pac. Ospreay then hits a Hidden Blade for a near fall, as well as another Oz Cutter. Ospreay then hits a Styles Clash, and then Ospreay hits another Hidden Blade on Pac, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Will Ospreay. Couple things I want to talk about with this matchup, man. Number one, this was, to me, honestly, one of the matches of the night besides Adam Page and Swerve. This was a great match. And to be honest with you, man, this is one of those matches where, like, you have two competitors in the ring that are almost identical, bell to bell. And to me, this was that pure definition of that. Pac is completely underrated. And honestly, it is kind of a shame that Pac is not either currently a TNT champion, international champion, or AEW world champion at this point. Pac is severely underrated. And at some point, I feel like he's definitely underutilized in AEW. Pac is a phenomenal performer. He's a great wrestler. And this match goes to show you what Pac can actually do in that ring. Will Ospreay, I mean, I praise Ospreay since he's come into AEW. I've seen Ospreay, obviously, over in New Japan. Ospreay is levels above a lot of talent in professional wrestling right now, man. He is the best wrestler in the world, in my honest opinion. I mean, the amount of shit that guy does in the ring is incredible. Absolutely incredible. I know, even after that matchup, I know Ricochet and Ospreay had a little back and forth banter backstage. I'm all for seeing Ospreay versus Ricochet. Those guys will tear the house down. I'm all for it. And I think it's going to set up a hell of a match, if not better than what we got between Pac and Ospreay. I think Ricochet and Ospreay are going to tear the house down. But again, man, Ospreay, he doesn't disappoint. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, they're getting sick and tired of Ospreay. I'm not. I think Ospreay is a company guy. I don't see him going anywhere anytime soon with AEW. I think he's one of those AEW lifers, if I had to be honest with you, where his bread's buttered in AEW, man. He has a lot of opportunities being with AEW and working with Tony Khan. He can wrestle over in New Japan, Rev Pro, or any other wrestler, like wrestling company that's on the independent scene, if if Ospreay chooses to do so. But Ospreay is, to me, he is the ace of AEW right now, in my honest opinion. I mean, the amount of matches that he's put on since he's been with AEW officially has been incredible. I mean, the match he had with Takeshita, the match he had with Bryan Danielson, the match he had with Pac at All Out. I mean, he's continuously putting on 5-star like classics every single time this guy steps in the ring. And people could say what they want, but I mean, Ospreay is levels above, man. He is an MVP for AEW, and a great signing from Tony Khan to bring in someone like Will Ospreay. Ospreay, it's one of those things where you look forward to his next match, but I think his next match will actually be Ricochet, which I'm all for it. Ricochet and Ospreay are going to tear the house down. Hats off to Ospreay for getting the win in that matchup and defending the international title. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. Again, another really good matchup. It is a street fight between Willow Nightingale and Chris Statlander. I thought this was a fantastic match. Back and forth matchup. Chris hits a chair shot on Willow, as well as a powerbomb through the announce table. Statlander then hits Willow with a trash can. Willow gets up, hits Chris with a pretty much bunch of light tubes on the stage. Willow then hits a Death Valley driver. Chris hits a spear off the stage through a table. Chris then hits a Spanish fly off the top rope. Willow and Chris then both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Chris hitting a tombstone on Willow. And then Statlander applies a submission hold with a chain. And your winner of the match is Chris Statlander. Couple of things I want to talk about with this matchup too, man. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but this was a fantastic match. I know a lot of people were actually against this matchup, as well as the main event between Swerve and Paige, which I will get into more details and how I felt about those matches later on in the podcast. But I know a lot of people were disappointed with what was going on here between Willow and Stat as far as what was taking place. To be honest with you, and this might be a hot take for a lot of people, this was by far one of the best women's matches I've seen in AEW for quite a while. I would probably say since we saw Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. As far as the women in AEW, this was a great match, and honestly, I was kind of wondering what was going to happen in the follow-up after Ospreay and Pac's great matchup that they had. And Statlander and Willow, they tore the house down, man. This was a great street fight. Both these women tore the house down in this street fight, both Willow and Chris Statlander. And to be honest with you, it's probably one of the best women's matches I've seen in a very long time with AEW. And I know some people are like, oh, they shouldn't be doing this, and this is not pro wrestling. No, this is pro wrestling. A lot of people, which, again, I will get into towards the end of this podcast, but people always say, oh, well, AEW needs to be the alternative. This is exactly what we got with All Out on Saturday night, 100%. And this match was one of those definitions of why they are the alternative, because WWE's not doing this shit at all with the women's roster, at all. And these two women tore the house down last night in this street fight. It was one of my favorite matches of All Out. And again, man, this was a great match. Hats off to Statlander for getting the win in this matchup, but I definitely look forward to what's going to happen next for Willow and Statlander moving on after this matchup they had at All Out. Moving on from that, we have a Continental title matchup. It's a fatal four-way matchup. It is Orange Cassidy, Takeshita, Mark Briscoe, and Okada. I thought it was a good match. It was a back-and-forth matchup. Takeshita and Mark Briscoe both exchange in the middle of the ring. Briscoe pays respect to Cactus Jack by hitting an elbow drop off the apron. Orange Cassidy hits the Stundog Millionaire in the middle of the ring. Briscoe and Orange Cassidy both exchange in the middle of the ring, as well as Okada and Takeshita. Takeshita then hits a Blue Thunder Bomb. Briscoe then hits a Froggy Bow off the top rope. Okada hits an elbow drop. Orange then hits an Orange Punch. Mark then hits Jay Drilla in the middle of the ring. Orange Cassidy then hits a Beach Break. Okada hits a Rainmaker, and then Okada hits another Rainmaker on Orange Cassidy. Pins him for the 3. And your winner of the match and still Continental Champion is Okada. Hats off to Okada for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Shida versus Mercedes Moné for the TBS title. I thought it was a good match, man. Camille was actually banned from ringside throughout this entire match. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Shida and Moné, with Shida pretty much keeping the pace of the match. Shida and Moné both exchange in the middle of the ring. Moné hits the 3 Amigos on Shida. Shida then hits 3 Falcon Arrows on Moné for a near fall, but Moné hits the Moneymaker on Shida, pins her for the 3, And your winner of the match and still TBS champion is Mercedes Moné. Hats off to Mercedes Moné for getting the win in that matchup and defending the TBS title. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the AEW World Championship. It is Jack Perry versus Bryan Danielson. I thought it was a good match, man. It was a back-and-forth matchup between Perry and Danielson, with Danielson keeping the pace of the match. Danielson then lands multiple yes kicks on Perry. Danielson then applies a label lock on Perry, but the hold is broken. Danielson and Perry both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Danielson hitting a suplex-type maneuver off the apron. Danielson then goes for a running knee, but missed and took out the referee. The Young Bucks come out to the ring. The Bucks attack Danielson. Yuta and Claudio and Jon Moxley are also there at the ring. Perry then hits a running knee for a near fall, but Danielson hits another running knee, taking out Perry, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Bryan Danielson. After the match, Killswitch comes out to the ring. He attacks Bryan Danielson. Christian Cage is here with the Patriarchy. Moxley is here with the Blackpool Combat Club. And then all of a sudden, Claudio hits a European uppercut on Bryan Danielson. Danielson looks shocked. Moxley then attacks Danielson. Yuta is trying to save Danielson, but he is attacked and stopped by Pac. Couple of things I want to talk about this, man. And again, this is going to be a hot topic for a lot of people, and I will discuss more of it towards the end of the podcast here. This was a hell of a moment. This was a crazy moment, man. This was one of those moments where fans, and even now, even today, fans are really pissed off of what happened and what was condoned on All Out during this matchup, from Moxley, and the situation that he had with Bryan Danielson, and Danielson, Moxley beating the hell out of him, and just the whole situation, man. Really what came down to it was Moxley and Bryan Danielson and what happened between those two during this segment that had a lot of people's concerns about AEW. And I'm not going to sit here and say I condone what happened and what Moxley did to Bryan Danielson, but what I will say is this. The storyline of what Moxley's doing here and what he said for the past couple weeks, that this is not their company anymore and yada, 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 him teaming up with Marina Shafir, it's creating buzz around AEW, which is a good thing. It brings eyeballs to the product. It gets people invested on what the hell is going on with Jon Moxley. My standpoint is still the same. I still believe at some part of this deal or this story here with Moxley, we will hear from Shane McMahon. I think Shane will be the catalyst, if you will, or the spokesperson for this new faction. And it looks like there's like a little takeover here, NWO style, if you will, with Moxley's new stable taking out some of the members of AEW, starting with the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. But I do think that Shane will be a part of this situation here with Jon Moxley. And again, I will reiterate, a lot of people were actually pissed off about what happened between Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. A lot of people were pissed off. Me personally, was I pissed? No. But it was a little off-putting in what they were doing in that match? Yeah. I didn't see Moxley going to that extent in what he did. And I could say the same thing about Adam Page, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the storyline around it definitely got me intrigued on what the hell is going to happen next. And it looks like Jon Moxley will be going up against Bryan Danielson relatively soon. And I think that might be, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but this might be something where Jon Moxley ends up dethroning Bryan Danielson and becomes the new AEW World Champion, where Bryan Danielson rides off of the sunset and retires from full in-time ring competition, and he'll have a part-time schedule after he loses the belt, possibly to Jon Moxley. I think that's what they're setting this up to be, where Moxley is going to be the one that dethrones Bryan Danielson, and Danielson retires from full-time in-ring competition. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen here. But like I said, man, was it crazy what happened with Moxley and Bryan Danielson? Absolutely. But is the story intriguing? Hell yeah, absolutely. Moving on from that, we go into the main event of All Out. It's a lights-out steel cage match. It is Adam Page versus Swerve Strickland. This was a fantastic match. It was a great match, back-and-forth matchup between Page and Swerve. Page and Swerve both exchange in the middle of the ring, but Swerve quickly hits a house call on Page. Page then pulls out a stapler. He uses the stapler on Swerve. Swerve then pulls out pictures of his family and staples pictures onto Page's face. It looked absolutely brutal. Page was trying to keep the pace of the match. Page hits Swerve with a chair shot. Swerve then hits another house call on Page. Swerve hits Page with a chair shot. Swerve then drops Page on a cinder block that looked absolutely brutal. Swerve then hits a Swerve stomp on Page through a table. Page gets up, hits a dead eye on Swerve. Swerve hits Page with a burnt spike that he actually got from the house that Paige had burnt down. It was Swerve's childhood home. Paige then hits a powerbomb on the center block on Swerve that looked absolutely brutal for a near fall. Swerve then gets up, hits another house call. Paige hits a powerbomb off the top rope on Swerve as well as a dead eye for a near fall. Paige then hits Swerve. He grabs a syringe and he puts it in Swerve's mouth, and then Paige hits Swerve with a devastating chair shot. Referee sounds for the bell, and your winner of the match due to knockout was Adam Page. Couple things I want to talk about, man, as far as All Out before I get out of here. Let's talk about the Adam Page and Swerve situation, if you want to call it that. A lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, were pissed off and just completely upset about what happened with the Swerve and Page segment, especially with Page doing what he did with Swerve as far as the syringe is concerned. And I'm sure probably, maybe some of y'all that actually watch this podcast probably want to know my opinion on what happened with Swerve and Page, and do I believe it was taken over the top, or was it something that was just blown out of proportion? Do I believe it was taken over the top? Yeah. I think in a lot of ways that situation in that moment, it was taking it over the top. And there was other ways that Page could have done this. I mean, for all intents and purposes, obviously there was something that had to be done in this matchup between Page and Swerve that would have solidified the end of this rivalry between Page and Swerve, because it's gone on for a long time, a very long time, since Full Gear, I believe, last year. So obviously there needed to be something that solidified and something that came to an end with this beef, if you will, between Swerve and Page. Were there other ways of going about it? Absolutely. To me, there could have been a situation that, Swerve and Page was fighting off the top rope, and somehow one of those guys got pushed off the top of the cage and went through the announce table, kind of like a Taker Cactus Jack deal, or Taker and Mankind kind of deal back in the day for King of the Ring and Hell in a Cell. There was definitely other things they could have done in this matchup besides what Page did with that syringe. And I think a lot of people were irate and pissed off about that situation. To me, when I initially saw it happen, and not taking anything away from GCW and what they do. I know they do those violent, the crazy violent matches and the hardcore matches and all that stuff. That's probably way past what ECW was doing back in the 90s. And there's some fans out there that love what GCW is doing, and some fans that are not particularly, happy with what GCW is doing. Me personally, I don't really care what GCW is doing. I'm not saying I'm a fan or not a fan. I just don't really tune into GCW. But with that being said, this reminded me of a GCW moment where it was kind of a little too hardcore for AEW. And I know that might be a hot take for most people. Like, some people might be saying, oh, that's, this is BS, that's bullshit. But you got to look at the narrative. I mean, obviously, I know some people are saying, oh, this is a bad route for AEW to take because they're looking for sponsors and they're still in talks with a TV deal. And this might be something where this might affect that TV deal or possible sponsors leading down the road because of this incident. I don't know. But what I will say is that as far as the TV deal, they've been dangling this TV deal shit in front of our faces for months now, with really nothing going on. Only thing that we found out from Tony Khan about the TV deal is what he said before All Out took place on Saturday, is that he truly believes that AEW will be on TBS and TNT for the foreseeable future. But that's only details that we got about what they want to do with the TV deal moving forward with Time Warner and Warner Media. Do I think what Page did with Swerve was a hot take? Yes, I do. And I said the same thing about Bryan Danielson. I think there was other ways they could have gone about it. Now, there's a immense difference between the both. Like I said, I don't agree with what Moxley did to Bryan Danielson, but I am intrigued with the storyline on why he attacked Bryan Danielson and what is the plan with this stable, because right now we don't have much of a clue. Now, we know that it seems like Claudio and Pac are joining the forces with Jon Moxley and Marina Shafir. We don't know what's going on with Yuta. Yuta's probably not going to be going over to Moxley's stable. Yuta is the last person, if you will, besides Bryan Danielson, is still a part of the Blackpool Combat Club. And Yuta was pretty much stuck watching Moxley beat the hell out of Bryan Danielson. So we don't know what's going to happen with Yuta. We don't know if Bryan Danielson is going to bring in a new stable to battle up against the new stable against Jon Moxley. I know a lot of people have been speculating Bobby Lashley. This could be something where Bobby Lashley comes in with MVP and Shelton Benjamin, and maybe there's a little Hurt Business thing here, or Hurt Syndicate, or whatever. Maybe they align themselves up with Bryan Danielson. I don't know. I think it's a stretch, but I'm not going to, anything can happen. But like I said before, when it pertains to Moxley and Danielson, I do believe that this is setting up a championship matchup between Moxley and Danielson, where Moxley does dethrone Bryan Danielson, and Danielson retires from full in-ring competition, and Moxley becomes the new AEW World Champion. I think that it just fits the mold of this story, and that's why I also believe this is something where they're going to bring Shane McMahon in, because Shane can be the vocal point. Moxley already told Shivani 2 weeks ago that this is not their company anymore, and this will be a great segue to bring in Shane McMahon to be someone that's trying to take over, like I said, what Tony Khan and AEW has been trying to do for the past 5 years, and now Shane's coming in to completely just decimate everything that Tony Khan and AEW have built up to this point. And with him bringing in Jon Moxley, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. And when you think about it, legitimately wise, this is a invasion angle. If you really want to look at it from another angle, this is an invasion. I mean, if you look at the people that's on this stable right now with Jon Moxley, these are a lot of former WWE talents that were with WWE and now are signed with AEW. You got Moxley, you got Shafir, you got Claudio, and you have Pac. These are all former WWE talents that were with WWE at one point and that are now with AEW. So what better way to do that invasion angle with none other than Shane McMahon? It just fits perfectly. This whole storyline here might be a hell of a lot better possibly than what the Elite were doing with Tony Khan. You know, and we still don't know what the end game was with the Young Bucks and the Elite with Tony Khan. We have no idea where that was going. And it still doesn't really technically have an end game here. We don't know what the hell happened with that storyline. So, again, I mean, it's one of those things where, again, I get why people are pissed off. I get why people are frustrated. And, again, I have to agree with a lot of y'all. I think the Danielson thing was a little much. Like I said, I'm intrigued by the story, but the actions from Moxley was a little bit over the top, and what Paige did with Swerve was insane. I mean, I don't know who decided to do something like that, or if it was Tony Khan saying, oh, yeah, we're all for this. I don't know. Do I think it was a bad look for AEW? Yeah, I do. Do I think it might affect sponsorships and maybe the possible TV deal? It might have something to do with it, possibility. But, again, that's hearsay at this point. I mean, nobody really truly knows. Nobody knows. I don't think Tony Khan would do something in that situation that would really jeopardize AEW as a whole, as a company, moving forward. But, I mean, a lot of people were upset with that moment. But like I said, there had to be something that Paige and Swerve had to do in this matchup to end this beef. And even after this match, I believe Swerve is also going to take some time off. So, again, man, this was something that, it had to be significant enough to really put a pin in this rivalry, to be honest with you. It'd be like, okay, holy shit, this happened, and then the story finally came to an end. And it hopefully, after what happened at All Out, the storyline between Swerve and Paige is over. Swerve obviously going to take some time off, and Paige can move on to other opportunities. And that's what needs to happen, in my honest opinion. As far as everything else, and people, and this is the other thing too that I might gripe about here for a second. People like to complain a lot about, oh, well, AEW's not doing this, AEW's not doing that, AEW is no longer the alternative. Well, with all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, what AEW did it All Out was showing you the alternative from top to bottom. Because the shit that we saw at All Out, you ain't never going to see in WWE television, ever. And I'm saying even if Raw goes over to Netflix, I know they're thinking about not going PG or whatever, or changing their programming, not from PG to TV-14 or something like that, over to Netflix, and having a more, I wouldn't say Attitude Era-ish, but a lot more realism to their wrestling over in Netflix, as far as, different types of, language and hardcore moments and stuff like that, and maybe, hardcore matches. It's a possibility. I don't know what the criteria is for Raw to go over to Netflix, or if Netflix wants to keep, and WWE wants to keep Raw, PG programming, or they want to take it to a TV-14 programming going over to Netflix. I have no idea. But what I'm telling you is, from bottom line, is that what we saw at All Out, you're never going to see that with WWE. Ever. Ever. You're not going to see someone pull out a syringe during a match. You're not going to see two women going at it in a hardcore matchup where both of them are busted wide open. You're not going to see that. I mean, WWE pretty much has a zero blood tolerance for their matches. I mean, they do not want it. They do not accept it. They do not want it on their television. Where AEW is vastly different. Especially what we saw at All Out. From Swerve to Paige to Statlander and Willow Nightingale, which, to be honest with you, the Nightingale and Statlander match was awesome. I think it was one of the best women's matches I've seen probably since Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, to be honest with you. And I'm all for it. Like I said, people are looking for, AEW being the alternative. This was the alternative. And like I told you guys before, unfortunately, the AEW that we once all fell in love with that happened 5 years ago, and the mission statements from Cody Rhodes to Kenny Omega to the Young Bucks and to even Tony Khan, that mission statement is no longer there anymore. They have completely diverted from what the hell they were talking about in the beginning to what they are now. There's no tag team division anymore. Rey Fenix and Penta are leaving. Starks is looking like he's going to be going over to WWE. There's no tag team division anymore. They have to change shit up. And this might not be the right direction for AEW, but this is the change that they might be going forward with. And if it helps them, then great. If it affects them, then you got to blame Tony Khan. I mean, a lot of people after All Out are even saying that Tony Khan does not need to be in the position that he is in AEW. I can't sit here and say that I don't disagree with y'all. I think Tony Khan has a lot of shit on his plate, and I said that from day one. Tony Khan doesn't trust anybody really with this company besides Tony Khan. And unfortunately, it also cripples this company. It does. And you can look at all the narratives from the Young Bucks situation with CM Punk and everything else like this. Obviously in that situation, both people were at fault. And you can look at the narrative, man. Obviously, there's, Paige looks like he's not really interested in what the Bucks are doing. Kenny Omega's kind of doing his own thing. I know he's out with injury. This whole company is surrounded by Tony Khan and the Young Bucks. That's really what it comes down to. And it's affecting the company. It truly is. I mean, I still believe, is Tony Khan Mr. Pay-Per-View? Absolutely. Because I did not think that Tony Khan was going to pull out an event with a week to 2 week build going into a pay-per-view and pull off the pay-per-view that he did. I think he did a fantastic job with All Out. Yeah, there was some crazy moments and crazy situations, but the card from top to bottom was stacked. You had video packages played throughout the show. You had a video package opening the show, which was great. Different types of pyro. It definitely was a different type of show. And not only that, we got an 8-match pay-per-view lineup where, Tony Khan does 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 matches for pay-per-views, and it runs until about 1 in the morning. You know what I mean? Where after half the matches, you're kind of like, just like, the hell with it. You know what I mean? You were actually, every single match on this card, you were locked in, and you were actually invested in these matches, whether it started from MJF to Bryan Danielson, or MJF and Daniel Garcia, all the way out to Swerve and Paige in that steel cage match. You were definitely, in tune to what the hell was going on. And I think that's something, hopefully, that pay-per-view format continues with AEW, where you only need 8 or 9 matches, and that's it. That's it. Quality over quantity. And it's always going to be quality over quantity for me, no matter what. I don't need 14 goddamn matches. Give me 8 matches. Hell, give me 7 matches. But make them worthwhile and build up storyline around these matches, because at the end of the day, fans want a story. And I've said this countless times to you guys with AEW. This is not, All Japan Pro Wrestling in the 80s or in the 70s, where it was pretty much a tournament-based match system. And I'm not taking anything away from All Japan Pro Wrestling. They had some great moments and great matches. A lot of legendary moments, a lot of legendary wrestlers wrestled for All Japan. Bruiser Brody, Bam Bam Bigelow. You have Kawada, Misawa. You have Dr. Death Steve Williams, who made a hell of a career for himself over at All Japan Pro Wrestling. I mean, he made a name for himself over there. Bam Bam Bigelow wrestled there. I mean, a lot of high-profile names had wrestled for All Japan Pro Wrestling, and they put on fantastic matches for All Japan Pro Wrestling with no storyline. And the fans over in Japan, they probably love that. But the fans over in the States want a story. They want to know why, the where, and the when. That's what the fans need. And Tony Khan needs to adapt that, and not this All Japan Pro Wrestling, New Japan Pro Wrestling style of wrestling, because the fans don't want that. New Japan Pro Wrestling, again, is almost like All Japan with the tournament base. If you look at the G1 Climax, it goes on for months. It's a great tournament. It's a fantastic tournament. But you have the G1 Climax, you got the Super Junior tournament that goes on for, again, multiple months. It's crazy. And they span those tournaments over many, many months and over many pay-per-view events until finally we get a winner of the G1 Climax or the Super Juniors. You know what I mean? And that's what New Japan's all about. It's not about the storyline. It's the best versus the best. Which, again, I'm not saying I'm not a fan of that, but we don't need that every single time. We don't. And some people are like, oh, well, Tony Khan really booked All Out for the sickos. Yeah, he kind of did. He kind of did. Especially what happened with Paige and Swerve or what happened with Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley. Yeah. Even Chris Statlander and Willow. But to be honest with you, I mean, I can't. Do I think it's a bad card? No, I don't think All Out was a bad card. I think All Out delivered what it wanted to deliver. We wanted to know more about what the hell was going on with Jon Moxley and the direction that he was going. I mean, all we knew before All Out was that it was him, Marina Shafir, that he continuously kept calling out Darby Allin, and the comment that he made to Tony Schiavone about telling Schiavone that this is no longer their company. We had no other idea of what Jon Moxley was even doing with what he said. We had no idea until All Out came around, and then he attacked Bryan Danielson, which ultimately broke up the Blackpool Combat Club. And now Moxley has aligned himself up with Claudio, Marina Shafir, and Pac. We don't know what else is going to come out of this, and hopefully around Dynamite this week we find out more information, hopefully, about what partake between Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson and what's Moxley's plan moving forward with this possible new stable. You know, and hopefully Dynamite we get a lot more answers to a lot of our questions that we have as fans of what the hell is really going on here. What's next for Paige? You know, what's next for Bryan Danielson? What's next for Jon Moxley? And hopefully we get a lot of those questions answered this Wednesday on Dynamite. And I'm hoping that that does happen, because a lot of people have a lot of questions about what partake did All Out. But, you know, before I get out of here, like I said, man, I think it was a solid event. Do I think AEW took it over the top in a couple situations? Yeah. The Adam Page situation and Danielson and Moxley was a little bit over the top. I think there was other ways they could have gone about it. But like I said, man, I mean, the storyline, I was intrigued by the storyline with Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. I wasn't too happy about what he did by attacking Bryan Danielson the way that he did. And even Page using that syringe in that matchup against Swerve, I wasn't really thrilled with that, because it was like, okay, we went from AEW to, you know, a GCW event, which, again, I'm not disrespecting GCW. I think what they do over there is absolutely insane. But that's GCW. This is AEW. And I just think Page took a page out of that book and put it into this matchup. And I think it was just too much over the top for AEW and the AEW fan base, because, like I said, a lot of people were upset and pissed off about what happened between the Swerve and Page situation and Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley. But, you know, again, it was a solid event. And again, I mean, Tony Khan continuously keeps proving that he is Mr. Pay-Per-View with putting on the events that he does, man. And I think the next event we got for AEW coming down the pike here is in October for Wrestle Dream. So again, another good, you know, pay-per-view coming up for AEW. Definitely looking forward to that pay-per-view, and definitely looking forward to Dynamite this week, man, because like I told you guys a minute ago, there was a lot of questions that are going to be asked that the fans want answers to, and hopefully we get some more insight of really what the hell is going on here with Jon Moxley and Bryan Danielson. But with that being said, this is my review of AEW's All Out. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember,